for all your help. Welcome to our last February program, and thank you for joining us this evening for our program on Wisconsin, America, and the Climate Crisis with Dan Dieterich. Back in January, I was able to inform you about the Bald Eagle Nest Watch program with the Wisconsin DNR, and I joined and was able to make my first eagle nest observation today. And the nest was quiet, but that doesn't mean it will be. My husband just told me that if you follow the Decorah Eagle Cam, the Decorah Eagles in Decorah, Iowa, laid their first egg today. So anyway, there's another opportunity similar to that, though, happening at the Mead. Craig Zilikowski emailed, and he's looking for help from Alas members to help them monitor prairie chickens on the Mead. The commitment would be 1 to 2 mornings a week. And I will put details on how to contact Craig if you're interested in helping them out with prairie chicken monitoring. I do believe that mornings up on the Mead would be very beautiful and worth your while. The Alas board and the program committee works hard to bring you relevant programs on a variety of topics that we hope inform and draw plenty of interest. And by the numbers of people who showed up tonight, I think that's true. I hope you are looking forward to hearing from Dan Dieterich as much as I am this evening. And here's Ned Grossnickel to introduce Dan. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. It is my honor to introduce my longtime friend, Dr. Dan Dieterich, as tonight's program speaker. Dan has been a member of Alas for many years. Dan taught English at UWSP for 35 years, where he received awards for both community service and excellence in teaching. Since retiring, he has been a full-time volunteer for the Citizens Climate Lobby, also known as CCL, for almost 10 years. He's one of 2 people coordinating the work of 6,600 Wisconsin CCL supporters and over 20 Wisconsin chapters. Here in Wisconsin's 3rd congressional district, he leads one of the 5 chapters. CCL has grown to include over 600 members in the Stevens Point and Wisconsin Rapids area. Before joining CCL in 2012, Dan helped to found and lead the Green Team at Frey Memorial Presbyterian Church, the Interfaith Community for the Earth, as well as the Central Wisconsin chapter of Wild Ones, Native Plants, Natural Landscapes. Thank you, Dan, for presenting tonight's program. Over to Dan.
Thanks so much, Ned. Appreciate the nice introduction. Also want to thank Alas for inviting me to speak this evening. And I want to thank each of you who have showed up. It would have been lonely without you folks. I'm going to describe where we are at this moment in the climate crisis we're facing. Review how we got here, and most importantly, discuss how we can avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis. After nearly 10 years as a full-time volunteer climate advocate, I remain hopeful, and I'll share reasons you should share my eco-optimism and join me in climate advocacy if you haven't already done so. The climate crisis is the defining issue of our time. UW-Madison's La Follette School of Public Affairs recent poll on state and national policy found climate change to be the top issue for Wisconsin residents, 59% of whom rated it as quite a problem or an extremely big problem, with widespread support across the political spectrum for solutions to climate change. I've received permission from Bob Lindmeyer, who's the senior chief meteorologist of WKOW TV in Madison, to use some of his PowerPoint slides in this presentation. He got many of them from Climate Central, but Climate Central doesn't have slides on Stevens Point, Wisconsin. So I'm instead using slides that they do have on Green Bay. While the climates in the 2 cities aren't identical, they're close since we're both at about 44 degrees north latitude and we're only 77 miles apart. So you'll be seeing those as we go through the presentation this evening. I want to begin though by talking about the global warming's 6 Americas. I don't know if you've heard of this or not before. It's courtesy of the Yale Program on Climate Communication and George Mason University Center for Climate Change Communication. And what they did was they figured that a way to divide up all of us Americans into one of 6 camps regarding climate warming, global warming. And those 6 camps encompass all of us to some degree or another. And the question for you to think about is, which one are you? I'm guessing you're one of the first 2 I'll be showing you. The first of which is alarmed. That's definitely the category I put myself in. I'm alarmed. I'm convinced that climate change is real and it's human caused and it's an urgent threat. I strongly support national and state climate action. The second of the 6 is concerned. Those folks, I'm sure that includes many of you as well, think climate change is a real human caused serious threat. You support climate action, but think climate impacts are in the future and mostly in other places, not here in central Wisconsin. So for you, climate change is a lower priority. Third group is cautious. You haven't made up your mind whether climate change is real, human caused, or serious. Fourth is disengaged. These folks know little about climate change. They rarely hear people talking about it, don't know much about it. Then there are the doubtful. They don't believe climate change is real or think it's part of a natural cycle and probably not a serious risk. And the dismissive, who believe climate change is not real, isn't human caused, isn't a threat, and may believe that climate change is a hoax. Those are the 6 categories rather, of Americans that these 2 centers have put us all in. And here's what they found when they did that. They started doing surveys. I think the first one was back about 2007 or 8. But in 2014, they found that 13% of Americans were alarmed about climate change. 31% were concerned, 23 cautious, 7 disengaged, 13 doubtful, and 13 dismissive. So in other words, about a third of Americans were either disengaged, doubtful, or dismissive, but those who were alarmed or concerned only constituted 44%. Not a lot. Then they did another study. This one they did in September of 2021. And they found that the alarmed had grown from 13% to 33%, a 20% rise. And where did those come from? From every one of the other 5 categories. Every one of them lost people to the alarmed category. So we have had a major shift in our nation in our attitudes about climate change. And the question is, why? What happened? A lot of people have experienced the climate crisis themselves, or they know people who have experienced it. That may include you. You may have been hit by one of the derechos that have gone whipping through central Wisconsin in the past few years and had some damage to your house or trees from that. You may know people who have been impacted by climate change. One of the members of our chapter mentioned that her daughter was planning on moving to the Stevens Point area because where she had lived, which I think was in Arizona, hadn't had any particular fires or damage there, but was in the path of all the smoke from the fires in California. And as a result, her daughter was having serious problems with asthma. And so for the safety of her daughter and her granddaughter, they're planning to move up here. This is a kind of a strange little thing, but I decided to stick it on here anyhow. I just read this week. One thing that happens when you become a climate activist is you find out all sorts of interesting little things. Power failures tied to major weather events increased by 60% since 2015. And in 2020, they lasted 3 times as long as they did in 2013. So Even if you haven't had trees down, you may have had some power outages tied to weather events, and you're finding that those are coming a lot more often than they used to. We are all also hearing more about climate change in public forums such as social media, TV, radio. We're hearing a lot about it. 3-4 years ago, we heard nothing. I know because I was listening. I was trying to find some so I could find out what the national media were saying about it, but they weren't saying anything. Now they're saying a lot. And there's been bipartisan support for policy approaches to curb climate change. And the one that comes to mind, of course, is the infrastructure bill that was passed by a bipartisan vote and allocated $150 billion for clean energy advancement and adaptation. Not mitigation, by the way, which means stopping climate change, but responding to it after it happens. And also another $73 billion for modernizing the US electric grid to help transmit solar and wind power. So that's just one of many bills that have been passed recently. As a result, the number of people in the alarm group increased by 9 percentage points just from March to September of 2021 alone. In a 6-month period, 9% more people were alarmed than were in March of 2021. That's pretty amazing. So that's why the change. We are all feeling hit by it. We're aware of it. We know more about it than we did before. I'm going to target in this talk 3 facts. First is that climate crisis is simple. It's not complex. It's easy to understand. It's serious. It's doing bad things already, and it's going to do worse things. And it's solvable. This is not an impossibility. This isn't Armageddon. It's not that nothing can happen. It can be solved. You and I can do it, but we have to work at it. It's real, it's us, and it's bad. Scientists agree to all 3 of those. It's not a joke. It's not a hoax. The Chinese didn't make it up. It's not a conspiracy of all the climate scientists in the world. It's real. And it's being caused by us, especially for the last 70 some years. All the impact on climate, all the changes in climate are caused by human beings. And it's bad, really bad, and will get worse. But we have solutions that are technically feasible, economically affordable, and politically viable. And we'll get into those later in the talk. 97% of actively publishing climate scientists agree human-caused climate change is happening. Almost 100% of scientific research studies published in peer-reviewed scientific journals find human-caused climate change is happening. Why? Real quick, I'm sure this is going to bore some of you, you know about this already, but our atmosphere is mainly made up of nitrogen and oxygen. 99% of it is that. That leaves 1%. Well, what's in that? Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and some other gases. But those are the things that are worrying people because they are greenhouse gases. And those greenhouse gases heat up the Earth's atmosphere. Why? Well, people have known since the early 1800s that carbon dioxide holds more heat than do nitrogen and oxygen. Some people in several countries, including Ireland and Germany and France, all over the place, discovered that this was going on. Carbon dioxide holds a lot of heat. Methane holds even more heat, but we'll come back to that later. So what's happening is that we're burning fossil fuels, putting carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases and other pollution into the atmosphere. And when we do, that carbon dioxide holds more heat. And that heat is an energy. And that energy does a lot of things. But one thing it does is warms up the atmosphere. And as a result, the temperature rises. It's a pretty simple system, right? So in the last 70 years, what's happened with carbon dioxide is that it has risen. This is from 800,000 years ago till today. And as you'll notice, the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere fluctuated quite a bit in the last 800,000 years, but never really went above 300 parts per million in our atmosphere. How do we know it's fluctuated that much? Well, they do ice cores, and they study what's in the ice cores, and they see how much carbon dioxide is in the ice cores. And they go back 800,000 years, and they find it goes up and down, but never goes above 300 parts per million. Until about 1950, and this is what happened in 1950. Zoom, up we go. Carbon dioxide rose between 1800 or 1880 rather, when it was about 0.1, it was about 290 parts per million. It has now risen to, it looks here like 410 is where it stops, but it doesn't. It's at 422 point something is the number I heard, which was a new record, by the way, at the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii for carbon dioxide. It's just gone crazy. And as a result, you can also see the temperature is going on the same path. It's just sweeping up just as the carbon dioxide is. It's a little bumpier on its trip, but it's going the same direction, right up to over 1.1 degrees Celsius, 1.98 Fahrenheit. Here is a shot of the global temperatures from the 1881 to the 1910 average. From that average, we have gone up to almost over 1.2 in I think 2020, over 1.2 degrees Celsius, 2.16 degrees Fahrenheit. The 10 hottest global years on record, therefore, are all of them 2010 and after. And in 2021, we were either the fifth, some records have us being the sixth hottest year on record. So it depends who you get your data from, how they acquire it, but not good. So we're heating up, and this is serious. Now, what's so serious about it? Well, the planet's getting hotter, and as a, whoops, sorry about that, folks. Try it this way. As a result of that, we're having rising seas, and we're having wild weather. I'm not going to get into the rising seas rather today, since we aren't on any oceans, but I will get into the wild weather and its impact on Wisconsin, on our area, etc. In Green Bay, the annual temperature in the last 50 years has gone up over 3 degrees. 3 degrees in the last 50 years. The fascinating thing to me about this, and I don't completely understand why, maybe Ned could tell us sometime, but the warming is hitting mainly in the winter, and it's warming up in the spring, summer, fall as well, but in the winter, it's really warming up a lot. And the result is that the seasons are shifting. The winters are warmer, but they're also shorter. The summers are longer. And this has some impacts. The average winter temperature in Green Bay has risen 5.8 degrees since 1970. The number of days above normal in this period in Green Bay has risen by 19. There are 19 more days above normal in the wintertime than there were in 1970. The lowest temperatures in the winter in Green Bay have now risen by 7.1%. So each year the low temperature is going up. So what? So it's a little warmer, a big deal. Well, more insects carrying diseases survive as a result of that. And they come up from the south carrying things like dengue fever, West Nile virus. Other insects carry other things like Lyme disease, and that's a problem. There's less snow for irrigation and winter businesses like snowboarding, snowmobiling, skiing, all the rest of those sports. Ask anybody running a ski hill, and they'll tell you all about it. They're in deep trouble. Fruit trees are blossoming too early, and that increases pollen. So what? Well, there are people who have problems with that pollen. Warmer air leads to more evaporation. More evaporation leads to more precipitation. There is more water available in the clouds, and that's why we no longer have those gentle spring flowers, spring sprinkles. Instead, we have spring downpours. 1 degree Fahrenheit increase in the temperature means there's 4% more water vapor in the atmosphere. And that 4% may not sound like a lot, but when it hits you, you know it. There are more downpours. This is a comparison of the number of downpours between 1958 and 2016. And you can see in our area, 42% more downpours, heavy precipitation events. Other parts of the country have less, and New England has more. So we have rising seas because of the heated atmosphere. We have wild weather. And what does that mean? It means serious implications for nature, for health, and for the economy. For nature, there are going to be a lot of extinctions. There have already been a lot of extinctions, but there are going to be more. The impact on birds is worth looking at. There are fascinating studies being done on this, and I am not an expert on the topic, but this is from The Guardian talking about one particular study saying that the most recent recorded year, 2019, spring arrived 42 days earlier than it did before 1986, 42 days earlier. And the danger, of course, is an ecological mismatch. Plants and hibernating or migrating insects, birds, and other wildlife are no longer synchronized. So the plants come up and blossom, and there's nobody there to fertilize, but enable them to blossom and grow and all the rest. And they're already being seen, for example, in England between orchids and bees and the great tit chicks and their crucial caterpillar food. So that's in England. Another is bird distributions in the United States. There was a study done of 89 species, and they concluded that long-term changes are happening in all 89 species. They studied over 9 bird groups over a 90-year period within the United States using the Audubon Christmas bird count. Another one say that brainy birds may fare better. Did a study of 70,000 birds that were killed by running into glass in big cities. And they found out that if a bird had a smaller brain, it was in more danger. They found out that relative brain size is often considered a proxy for behavioral flexibility in birds. Larger brain species of birds may be able to reduce their exposure to warming temperatures by seeking out microhabitats. So there's that. So as I say, I'm not an expert on the impact of climate on birds, but I do know that there are lots of impacts. Next thing that can happen with as a result of climate change is impacts on health. So it has an impact on nature, it has an impact on health. Rainfall patterns are shifting. They are concentrating heavily in some areas and less in others. So that results in both floods and droughts. Southwestern United States is now in a drought. And that drought is the worst drought in that area in 1,200 years. Just found that out this week. 1,200 years is, and it's going to get worse. What happens in floods and droughts? Well, people get hurt, for one thing. houses get knocked over, a lot of economic impact of that, but injury, mental illness. The public health people from the state of Wisconsin assembled 7, 8 years ago here in Stevens Point at Charles White Library Pinery Room, and they were trying to decide among themselves what were the things they were concerned about. And one of them that came right up was mental illness. People with under extreme anxiety are in danger of severe mental illness. Shifting rainfall also leads to violent storms, and those violent storms end up washing out crops and doing a variety of other things, killing people, washing out roads, homes, businesses. Warming temperatures lead to extreme heat, and extreme heat is the major cause of death from the climate crisis. More people die from extreme heat than from anything else. Our bodies aren't able to handle extreme heat. Already in parts of the United States, people are building houses at night because that's the only time they can go outside because it's too hot during the day. And the warming temps also support insect-borne diseases. Wildfires lead to fire and smoke, lung diseases, allergies, on and on. So we're having lots of problems here on our health. And the cost of that health is going to be, cost of the health services provided to these people is going to be enormous. There are also disasters that are billion-dollar disasters in the US. And here's a graph that got from Climate Central showing the average billion-dollar climate disasters over the years, and then the average in 2011, 2017, 2020, and 2021. And you notice the slight difference there. The highest average there in, say, in December was seven disasters. But in 2020, there were 23. And in 2021, there were 20. So the number of disasters is going up significantly. This is one of the few graphs you'll see today that where the bars are going down instead of up, because it's dealing with the number of days between billion-dollar disasters. And in the past, it's been 110 days or 90 days or 80 days, 70 maybe. And today, nowadays, it's closer to 15, 16. So we're getting a heck of a lot of climate disasters. And the real danger of all this is that we're moving in on 1.5 degrees Celsius of temperature change. And that's the target that the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has set for a number we do not want to go beyond. Originally, they said 2 degrees Celsius, and then they said, no, even that's not too dangerous. Let's make it 1.5. And we're almost there. It is a dangerous time for all of us. If we don't do anything further, by 2100, we'll be at 4 degrees Celsius warming or more. You notice that little cone that goes up there, it might be 5 degrees Celsius or it might only be 3. But when they put that cone on, you could ignore the it might be 3 part. It's 4 to 5 without any emissions cuts. With substantial emissions cuts, it's going to be maybe 2.2 down to 1.4, and hoping for a little bit below 2.2, or 2 degrees Celsius rather, 9 degrees Fahrenheit. That's with substantial cuts in emission. With those significant cuts, our warming will not be as significant. It'll be the map to the left. If we don't have those cuts, with the continued emissions, it will be the map to the right. And you can see there that half of Wisconsin, more than half of Wisconsin, would have over 6 degrees warming. But wait a second, I thought it was only supposed to be 4 degrees. But yeah, that's overall. And that means some places are going to be higher than that and some are going to be lower. And 6 degrees is what most of Wisconsin is predicted to be at. And some is just going to be a mere 5.5. By 2100, it's supposed to be in La Crosse, Wisconsin, 11.8 degrees hotter, which means it'll have the temperature on average that Mesquite, Texas has right now in La Crosse, Wisconsin. All right, so that's how nasty it all is. Now let's see what we can do about it. I want to talk with you about eco-anxiety, if I may. A recent Lancet survey found that 56% of young people ages 16 to 25 in 10 countries thought, this is a direct quote, humanity is doomed. Humanity is doomed. What is eco-anxiety? It's a chronic fear of environmental doom due to climate change. The word was invented around 2015. Before that, it didn't even exist. But around then, people began getting pretty anxious about the way the climate was going. So they came up with this word. And the question is, how many of you feel you have it? I feel I have it. I don't know how many of you feel a sense of impending doom, but a lot of people do, including over half the young people that they surveyed for the Lancet. So there's that. And then the question is, how are you handling it? What are you doing if you're worried about what's going on with the climate and afraid of what's going to happen to you or to your children or to your grandchildren or their grandchildren? What are you doing about it? I want to talk with you more about that, but first I want to cite an article on this subject from Good Housekeeping. I know this is, for most of you, something you read on a daily basis, and it's your source of all information on climate change. But I came across an article in it, strangely enough, that was based on an interview with a woman I have tremendous respect for, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, who is the head of the Climate Science Center at Texas Tech University and a Citizens Climate Lobby board member and the chief scientist of the Nature Conservancy. Very bright, capable woman. Her advice basically is to write down what it is you love. What do you savor? What would you miss if the climate crisis took it? We in CCL talk a lot about an alleged thing that E.B. White, the author of the most popular book in the history of the United States, one called Charlotte's Web, also the editor of the New Yorker. But anyhow, he once, in talking to somebody else or writing to somebody else, said, I awake in the morning torn between a desire to save the world and to savor it. And he said, this makes it hard to plan my day. But for all of us, especially all of us who like the outdoors, who are concerned about the environment, we all have that little dilemma, don't we? Am I going to save it or am I going to savor it today? But to save the world, you must first savor it. So what good thing have you experienced in the past that you would like to see future generations experience, but that the climate crisis might take away from them? I urge you to take a pencil right now and jot it down. What is it you love? What good thing are you crazy about, but you think might not be there unless we do something about what's going on with the climate? Then you will have something to savor, and you can decide whether and how to save it. Recognize that you can effect change. You can do something about this mess that we're in. Hayhoe, in this article in Good Housekeeping, talked about women's suffrage. How did that come about? How did women get to vote? Do you think all the men in Congress, and it was all men at the time, do you think they said, well, gee, we ought to do the right thing. Let's give women the vote? I don't think so. I think there were some small actions that took place. Some of them were even kind of largish. Women and men marching and protesting and writing, and eventually they got the suffrage, they got the vote. Apartheid. Why did that stop in South Africa? Did the government say, oh, this is a bad thing, we should stop doing this? No, it was people, individuals all over the world who are saying what you're up to is immoral and has to be stopped. Gay marriage, how did it get legalized in the United States of America? The infinite wisdom of Congress and the president? Not exactly, no. So it's individuals that can, through their individual actions, can pull together and accomplish things that as individuals they couldn't accomplish. We're going to come back to that. Third thing this article talks about is pushing the powerful. You have power. I have power. I'm not saying we have none, but I have a feeling that Tammy Baldwin has more. Ron Kind has more. Ron Johnson has more. Joe Biden has more. So if we want to see some action on a major level, we need to push the powerful. And Citizens Climate Lobby is really good at that. Spread the word. Tell your friends and family to join you in action on climate. If you encounter people who deny climate is happening, they say it's a hoax, it's not real, but don't argue with them. It's a waste of your breath. You're not going to change their minds. You're just going to frustrate yourself. Instead, find your people. Become part of a group that reduces, just being part of a group reduces your stress as an individual. That's the case for any group, any individual, any situation. If you're part of a group, you have less stress. You have other people who think as you do, who feel as you do, less stress. So find your people. It might be any number of environmental groups, including Audubon, who are your people, but there are other groups as well. And join with them and see what action you can take to keep this a livable planet. A few little quotes. One of the basic principles for citizens climate lobbyists may seem weird, but one of them is optimism. They have a whole list that they provide all of their members. And one of the items on the list hit me is optimism. Thucydides, let's go back to over a couple of years ago. Hope leads men to venture. No one ever yet put himself in peril without the inward conviction that he would succeed in his design. Thucydides wasn't gender neutral in his language, but that's beside the point. He's right about we only put ourselves in peril when we think we're going to succeed. And to do that, we have to hope. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. And I like, this is Paul Harvey, brings it right up to the end of the 20th century. I've never seen a monument erected to a pessimist. I haven't either. It takes some optimism to be able to do anything meaningful. And I can't think of anything more meaningful than putting an end to the climate crisis. What's your carbon footprint? I don't know how many of you have taken your carbon footprint, but I've taken mine. A lot of people have. How do you do that? Well, how much electricity did you, how much water did you use? How often and how far do you fly? How much garbage do you accumulate? How often do you eat fast food? Do you recycle? How often do you buy new clothes? How many miles do you drive? All these are things we're supposed to compute and come up with a number. And my number is 27 or 43 or 68 or whatever. And that's my carbon footprint. The question is, where did that come from? And the answer is fascinating to me because where it came from is British Petroleum. When? About 2005, they hired a very high-powered PR firm, and they came up with this idea. Why? Because if people are worrying too much about how much garbage they accumulate, they haven't got time to worry about what actually is pumping the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Why, that would be oil and gas and coal. So those things are what we really ought to be thinking about. And this was designed to distract us from what our real concern should have been. woman by the name of Emma Patty, climate journalist, came up with a new concept called your climate shadow. And that's not the same thing as your carbon footprint. What's involved with this? How do you determine your climate shadow? You look at your life choices. It's not as easy as what kind of car you have, or what kind of any individual item. There are a lot of things. How do you donate and invest your money? That says a lot about what your climate shadow is going to be. Your climate shadow follows you everywhere because it's what you leave behind. And what you leave behind is a planet that's in real trouble at the moment. How many children do you have? How many pets do you have? What kind of company do you work for? Have you installed solar panels or a wind generator? Have you reduced or given up flying? How much meat do you eat? What kind of meat is that? Do you compost? How often do you talk about the climate with friends and family? How do you talk about it? How much time do you devote to climate advocacy? According to several sources, as an individual, the 5 individual actions you can take that would have the most impact as an individual, not as a member of a group, are: have 1 fewer kid, get rid of your car, avoid flying on a plane, use green energy, and eat a plant-based diet. Now, I don't know how many of you have done all 5 of those. I sure haven't. I got a car, I avoid plane travel, I use green energy, I eat a somewhat plant-based diet, but I could eat a lot better plant-based diet. I'm working on it. Are you doing everything you can? That's the question. What else could you do? You could vote. We are lucky people. We live in a democracy. Our vote matters. Just listening yesterday, no, it was this morning, to some information about an election someplace. One vote made the difference. And a candidate who was eliminated because they were 1 vote short. I worked the polls yesterday at the town hall here, and there were a couple hundred people while I was there, but not many more than that. So just vote. And before you vote, find out what the views are of the candidates regarding climate change. There are other things we can do. We could have better buildings. We could have a building, the one to the far left there, with dynamic glass, which means that in the wintertime, it keeps the heat in and keeps the cold out. And in the summertime, it lets the heat in or at least lets the cold in and keeps the heat out in the summer. So it's wonderful, but a little expensive for my taste, unfortunately. But that insulation stuffed into the walls there, that I can afford. Most of us can, eventually. Heat and cool your house with electricity. We've recently gotten an electric dryer. It's more expensive for most people to have an electric dryer than to have a gas dryer, but we got one anyway because we just put some solar collectors on our roof. So it'll be cheaper for us. Use a high efficiency heat pump, a smart thermostat, energy smart appliances, more insulation, LED lighting. I heard something a week or 2 ago that of the light bulbs for sale in the stores today, 40% are not LED. There's the one for home use. 40% that people are buying are the old kind. I'm just used to using it. I'll use it some more. People can save about $580 a year on their utility costs with a climate-friendly home. They can also take about 3 tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere every year. You can save some lives. If we were driving electrical vehicles by 2050, we in Wisconsin could save 10,000 lives. That's not bad from the pollution deaths. This is a graph I came across, which I think is fascinating. And it's about what we eat. One of the most important things we can do is eat less meat. And this kind of points that out. You see down at the bottom there, it's talking about wheat, rice, maize, pulses, and roots and tubers. By the way, maize is corn and pulses are beans of various kinds. I don't know why they use fancy words for that, but they did. And notice the difference in terms of land use, far left, freshwater consumption, middle one, and greenhouse gas emissions, the right one, between eating corn and eating beef. Do I eat beef? Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but I do. I'm working on it, trust me. But I eat a lot more poultry than I used to. The pork is pretty high, but I eat more poultry. I eat more eggs. I eat more corn, rice, wheat. And you can get solar power. You can get wind power. It's an article in the newspaper last week, I think, about a guy who had several years ago put up a wind generator and some solar collectors. It cost him $150,000 to do it. And now, 20 years later, it's been paid off. That $150,000. I didn't pay $150,000 to put up my solar collectors. Why? Because the price has dropped by over 99% since 1970 for solar energy on your home. I expect mine to pay itself off, not in 20 years, but in 6. We'll find out. It shows where the solar energy shines, and you'll notice it shines everywhere in the United States except for the far northwest. And where the wind blows, and it blows a lot of places, but mainly down the middle of the country, including Wisconsin. We need to make big changes. This is a picture of Citizens Climate Lobby folks. I'm not sure, I may be in there. I've been there a couple times lobbying, and we bring a lot of people, as you can see from this picture. When we go, we haven't gone for the last couple of years because of COVID, but when we go, we have a few folks that show up and meet face to face with their Republican and Democratic members of Congress. And whoever they meet with, they treat them with respect, admiration. They show their appreciation for their service to the country, and they talk with them, try to listen more than they talk, to find out their views on climate change and persuade them to take the action that's needed. Grassroots, nonpartisan organization, as Ned said, over 6,000 people in Wisconsin, empowers people to make breakthroughs in their personal and political power, enables people to easily ask members of Congress to, just a second, I have to move something here, implement, there I go, I'm trying to read my writing, implement a carbon price, carbon fee and dividend. And they provide active hope workshops, Zoom workshops for CCL members, for people who are suffering from eco-anxiety. They have workshops, and I can tell you more about those if you're interested. A carbon price is the single most powerful tool available to reduce America's carbon pollution. That's a fact. There are other things we can do to reduce carbon pollution, greenhouse gases, lots of other things. This is the one that has the biggest punch. The way it works is we charge a fee on fossil fuels at the source, at the wellhead, at the coal mine. We say that for this amount of coal, if people were to burn it, it would cost this much, it would release this much carbon, and per ton, this is what you're going to pay fossil fuel company to the federal government every time you sell somebody some of your fossil fuels. Then that money is returned in equal amounts to everybody in the nation. The net revenue, the net just simply means they take out whatever amount it costs to send people checks or put money into people's accounts. Just as they pay money for the IRS or Social Security, they would have to do it for this too. And they provide for a carbon border adjustment. I will be happy to talk more with you about that if you would like later, but what it does is protect American businesses from being taken advantage of by other countries that don't have a carbon fee and dividend. We can deal with that later. Impact, net zero by 2050. we no longer have carbon in our environment by 2050 is the goal. We have affordable clean energy. Well, why does this bring affordable clean energy? Well, if you're paying more for gas, oil, and coal, that means that solar and wind and nuclear and tidal, any other kind of energy that doesn't release carbon is going to be cheaper. It will save lives. How many lives? Hundreds of thousands. And it will put money in your pocket each month. 30% less carbon emissions in the next 5 years if this were to go into effect. A little graph on that. Business as usual, not much changes. Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act drops the amount of carbon we emit by 90%. And the IPCC, which is looking for a 1.5 degrees Celsius or a 2 degrees Celsius, is on either side of what would happen with an Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which is the act which we're pushing as hard as we can in Congress. Saves lives. How many lives? 4.5 million over the next 50 years. Today, we're losing 350,000 lives each year due to air pollution. How much money? About $3,000 for a family of 4 in year 10. So about $3,000, and it would go up from there depending on what's going on in year 10 or down. We can do this. You and I have the power to do this. We have done it before. We have put people on the moon. We have flown rockets to Mars and Venus and elsewhere. In your pocket right now, there is a little tiny phone which has more computing power than a computer the size of my house would have had not that many years ago. We have pulled things off. We have, for that matter, we've developed oil and gas and coal, and that's been great. That's why we have the standard of living we do. And we didn't realize we were killing the environment and ourselves when we did it. So the time has come to shift away from that coal and oil and gas to something that is more life-giving. We can do this. Together, we can do this. We can do it as members of Audubon, as members of the Sierra Club, as members of Citizens Climate Lobby. Simple, it's serious, and it's going to get worse, and it's solvable. Have, Catherine Hayhoe, have climate conversations with your family, friends, and neighbors. In her view, that's the biggest thing you can do as an individual. Talk to people about climate. Tell them it's not a joke. It's killing lots of life here on the planet. If you want to join Citizens Climate Lobby, just pump in Citizens Climate Lobby into your browser and find that address. And, or for that matter, call Ned or call me, call somebody. And then use the CCL tools. CCL makes it super easy for you to write any of your members of Congress or the president. Super easy for you to call them. It won't take you more than a minute or two. And ask them to support a price on carbon in the budget reconciliation bill. Thank you. And I am under an hour, I think.
By a minute. Good job. Thanks so much, Dan. This is wonderful. We really appreciate that. We'll go ahead and take any questions. Again, folks, you are more than welcome to use the chat feature in order to ask any questions that you have for Dan. Dan, can you tell us more about the local group that you get together with? How often do you meet? How do you meet?
Sure.
How do you determine what the current priority is? It sounds like it's more of a statewide effort, but can you explain that a little more?
Sure. We meet once a month. We meet on the third Saturday of the month at 11:15, and we're meeting now, of course, on Zoom. We hope to have that over with very soon, like maybe in a month. all goes well.
Sure.
We determine our own goals. What do we want to accomplish? It's up to us. We are a grassroots organization. Citizens Climate Lobby has recently been telling us they want us to contact Tammy Baldwin because she is pivotal to getting a carbon price into the budget reconciliation bill. We have spent a lot of time also contacting Ron Johnson and Ron Kind. At this particular moment, they aren't as pivotal. So she's encouraging us, by she, I mean Madeline Pera, who is she was the president, but she got kicked upstairs. She's now the executive director of Citizens Climate Lobby, and she lives in Madison. But she is asking us to contact Tammy Baldwin, and it's up to us whether we do it. If we do it, it's very easy to do. And the idea is once a month, contact them and urge them to do what they should do. We come up with our own ideas too. For example, one of my ideas is to plant hazelnut trees. And I'm working with the wild ones, and we are going to see if we can plant as many hazelnut trees as possible. Why? They sequester carbon. They stabilize the soil. They feed the wildlife. They feed the human beings. If you watch the Great British Baking Show, every time half the recipes involve hazelnuts. But anyhow, so they're very tasty and they have a million other benefits, some of which are environmental. So anyhow, but that's up to us to decide. If our group decides to do that, we do it. If we decide not to, we don't.
What about how influential are we on our local politics, like with our mayor and actions happening in the city of Stevens Point or Portage County? Have we made any special actions here?
Yes, we have had resolutions introduced into the city council. A member of our chapter is a fellow by the name of Mike Wiesa. And he worked with us to develop the resolution. He supported the resolution. It was passed in the city council, and we are now considering putting another resolution into the city council, but that takes additional time and effort. Anybody interested in joining me and working on that is welcome to do so. But we have somebody doing some of that. Speaking of that, for the past election, by which I mean yesterday's, one of our members sent out a survey to the candidates for the county executive position and the candidates for the school board, asking them their views on climate change. Many of those were not returned by the candidates, but some of the candidates did return them, and I think it probably had an impact on our members, all of whom had the opportunity to read what those candidates had to say, and they said some good things.
Interesting.
So that's up to us. Other chapters around the state probably did not do that.
Great, thank you for that. There's a few questions. I heard about the spread of misinformation on solar and wind energy. It's been there before, but it's rampant up apparently. Some states are stopping projects, especially in rural areas. Is the CCL responding to this?
Not as an organization, a national organization. Are there individual CCL members who are responding to that here in Wisconsin? Yep, you bet there are. But yeah, it's like anything else. You have to keep working on it. You can't expect everybody to fall in line, and they don't. I think that the benefits to farmers in our area of having a solar farm are enormous. And many of them are doing it, and having wind farms, the benefits are enormous. But I can see where somebody would go, oh, I don't like that. And there are politicians who will say things like they just murder birds like crazy. Those wind generators do nothing but chop up birds. When, of course, the main thing that kills birds in the United States of America is?
Cats. I'm going to say cats or buildings.
It's buildings. Number one is buildings. Cats, I'm sure, are a close second, but it's sure as heck isn't wind generators. Anyway, so it's up to us to educate the general public. CCL is, by the way, an educational organization. That's what we do mainly, is educate people, and as well as educate our members of Congress.
A couple more reminders. I don't see any questions, so I'll just go ahead and do the reminders that we have. Great.
Wait, we have a
Yes.
question. We have a question.
Ned has a question.
Oh, sorry, Ned.
I was very happy to hear that CCL is encouraging contacting, especially Senator Tammy Baldwin. We just happen to have right here in central Wisconsin, myself, who's the liaison from CCL statewide for Senator Baldwin. So if you have a story, I want to hear it. I'll tell you my story. I'll make it quick. I've been fishing over 20 years in the same spot in Lake DeBay where I live. The cool water fishery of walleyes has gone down significantly. We're replacing cool water fish with warm water fish in Lake DeBay, gradually over a period of decades. And so that's one of my stories. I'd like to hear your stories. If you are seeing an effect on maple syrup production or you're anything, it's something that you see happening, a disconnect between insects and birds or whatever it is, I would be very happy to hear your story. And I will relay your story, if you don't want to do it yourself, to Senator Baldwin. And storytelling is a very effective way of making your point clear to members of Congress. Thank you. I have a team of 6 throughout the state of Wisconsin, 3 men and 3 women on Team Tammy, we call it. And we lobby last year 3 times. This year it'll be 2 times, June and November, probably. June for sure. And we will not be able to do it in Washington, D.C. because of January 6th. They are not allowing anyone in any area to lobby face-to-face in Washington, D.C. But you can do it virtually by Zoom. So that's an update on Senator Baldwin and her CCL team.
Great, thanks, Ned. Patty asks if does CCL have any public demonstrations in central Wisconsin planned in the near future that we might participate in?
We do not, that I know of. But if Patty, who is, I believe, a member of CCL, if she would get in touch with me about one that she would like to hold, I would be interested. We just got done doing one on fair maps around the courthouse. We did a demonstration there on fair maps because it relates to climate change. And it was a nonpartisan demonstration. But if you have other suggestions, I'd be delighted to hear them about other things to do. We often do these demonstrations with 350 Stevens Point, which is an organization at UWSP, which has a lot of students in it, and has also got Ned Grossnickel in it, who is our liaison from CCL to 350. And there are other community members in it, but they tend to have a lot of demonstrations about pipelines and such. So yeah, we can do those as a chapter, whether or not Citizens Climate Lobby itself backs it.
Great, thanks. This weekend is the Great Backyard Bird Count. It is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so get your eBird on and start looking at those feeders. You can learn more online about that, of how to use that and why your eBird logs really count at this time of this weekend specifically. Bird City's Wisconsin Rapids will be at Kiwanis Youth Outdoor Day, emphasizing owls at Lake Nepco in Wood County Park on Saturday, February 18th from 9 to 3. It is a free event, so a nice plug for that event coming up. So a lot happening there. Our next presentation is March 16th. We're going to be really looking at the birds right within Portage County. So we have one of our long-term Audubon members and board member as well. I forget if it's current or not, as our speaker, Birding in the Center, 3 Keys to Diversity of Bird Life and bird opportunities in Portage County. So please join us for that one. Of course, this program will continue to be Zoom next month as well. We hope to get back face-to-face later this spring, but for now it's going to be on Zoom. With that, Dan, thank you so much for this very informative. It was filled with a lot of information. Folks, this will be recorded, so if you wanted to go back and grab some of those details that he spoke at, we will have it available for you, and it will be posted on our Audubon YouTube channel after this. Dan, we really appreciate it. Thanks so much tonight.
Thank you, Dan.
Great job, Dan.